Hi, good evening, everyone. Please let me introduce myself first. My name is Juan Carlos Arbolella. I'm the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Gastronomy and Food Science. I'm also a professor at the Basque Culinary Center, located in the north of Spain, the Basque country. Thank you so much, first of all, to being here today in this webinar called International Journal of Gastronomy and Food Science, when culinary arts and research collide. More than 10 years ago, we started a very challenging project, a project where we wanted to merge science and gastronomy. We really believed at that time that the interaction between science and cooking could be beneficial, not only for the scientific and gastronomic world, but also for the whole society. Today, we are so pleased to share with you how was the process of this fantastic project, how we started, how the project was growing, and how we reached a point where we could compete with other scientific journals, getting, for example, the impact factor. Just to follow the whole session, I would like to show you the contents. If I may pass the slides. We're going to start with the origins. We're going to have two different parts. Firstly, the promoters will be with you, talking and explaining the origins, how we started, how we developed the project, and the importance of the impact factor. To finish with an open discussion about the future of this interaction about science and gastronomy. We will have Morgan Dagot, who is the publisher from Elsevier, Andoni Luis Aduriz, who is the honorary editor and chef of the Mugaritz restaurant, José María Iseaga, director of the Basque Culinary Center, and Rogelio Pozo, director from AZTI, Food Research Institute, based in the north of Spain, Basque country also. For the second part, if we can pass the slide, we will have the same structure, but with these people, with Dani Lassa, who was co-editor-in-chief of the journal, Charles Pence, a professor from Oxford University, associate editor, Julián Otero from Mugaritz, who is an associate editor also, and Joseph Youssef, who is the chef from the Kitchen Theory based in London. Just apologize because Jorge Ruiz couldn't make it at the end. I'm going to turn into Spanish just to introduce some people from the beginning. I would like to pass the slide. Buenas tardes, Rogelio. Buenas tardes, Andoni.
Buenas tardes.
Hola, Andoni, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás?
Bien, bien, bien. Encantado. Estoy en el mejor sitio posible, vamos, más contento que otra cosa.
Muy bien. Rogelio, ¿podemos verte, por favor? Buenas tardes, Rogelio, ¿cómo estás?
Que encantado, por supuesto, entre amigos, siempre se está genial y especialmente cuando celebras el éxito, yo creo que de un proyecto como este, que ahora hablaremos sobre él, pues todavía mucho más contento, ¿no?
Perfecto. Si veis en las diapositivas hay dos carátulas. La primera es la primera carátula que tuvimos en el primer volumen, en el año 2012, y la siguiente es la carátula que se inició en el año 2017 y en la actualidad existe todavía. Entre el 2012 y el 2017 ha habido muchísimo trabajo, pero ¿qué pasa antes del 2012? Estoy seguro de que todo el trabajo que se hizo antes del 2012 es muy grande. ¿Qué nos podéis contar? Andoni, por ejemplo.
Bueno, pues yo entiendo que una vez que se ha consolidado y que tiene índice de impacto, por eso estamos aquí, ¿no? Con gente bueno, pues tan relevante en el mundo de la ciencia y bueno, en ese puente entre ciencia y gastronomía, pues las cosas para el que viene o el que está observando ahora pueden parecer mucho más mucho más lógicas, mucho más obvias, incluso hasta mucho más fáciles, pero todo hay que decir que si nos remontamos unos pocos años atrás, venimos de una realidad, era que la cocina había poco a poco... Bueno, ya nosotros cuando yo me incorporo al mundo de la gastronomía, la gastronomía ya tenía bastante notoriedad, bastante exposición pública y bastante escucha. Y ocurrió una cosa que era bastante... por lo menos para parte de los cocineros era cuando menos desalentadora. Y es que cuando hablamos de investigación, cuando hablamos de creatividad, cuando hablamos de desarrollo, no se te pedían muchas explicaciones. O sea, es decir, al final tú puedes decir casi lo que quieras y lo que quieras, dadas las circunstancias, podían acabar en un titular y teníamos la duda de si realmente se podía dar el paso hacia tratar de articular una serie de mecanismos que ayudaran a que la cocina, ya que estaba en un momento tan importante, se acercase un poco a los compromisos y a las responsabilidades que tienen otros ámbitos del conocimiento, ¿no? Y la ciencia, por ejemplo. Entonces, eso estaba ahí, estaba latente, más allá de que también me vais a permitir que añada una cosa, más allá de que había, yo creo, un ejercicio también de responsabilidad, que tenía que ver con el hecho de que hay cocineros mediáticos y hay cocineros mediáticos trabajadores, hay cocineros no mediáticos trabajadores, que en cualquier caso podían estar desarrollando ideas, haciendo trabajos importantes, que de una u otra forma no tenían dónde encajarse para también reconocer esos esfuerzos, ¿no? Que nos hacen avanzar a todos. Yo creo que el conocimiento nos hace avanzar a todos. Todo eso estaba ahí, latente, ¿no? Y ocurrió que bueno, pues de una u otra forma, en conversaciones cruzadas, nosotros decidimos hablar con AZTI, yo con Rogelio, en una conversación donde le planteamos la posibilidad imposible, poco menos que imposible de soñar, o sea, lo digo sinceramente, o sea, por muchos motivos. Desde luego, abocada al fracaso casi seguro, de poder poner en marcha un proyecto que tuviera un poco esa relación entre ciencia y cocina, ¿no? La cocina que se preocupa en generar una relación diferente, mucho más organizada y mucho más acorde con lo que la ciencia también se exige, pero que pensábamos que estábamos lo voy a decir así, alguien se molestará, pero que estábamos en la prehistoria, desde esa perspectiva, ¿no? Y se lo propusimos a Rogelio, se lo propusimos a AZTI, y para sorpresa nuestra, pues fue un proyecto que ellos decidieron apostar por él y conseguir mediar y ser facilitadores con Elsevier, porque al final ellos son ciencia, AZTI tiene un lenguaje científico y nosotros queríamos entrar ahí y nos abrieron las puertas, nos facilitaron. Yo creo que, Rogelio, no sé qué opinarás tú, pero yo creo que, al menos desde mi parte, con más, con una sensación más de Quijotes que otra cosa, sabiendo que seguramente íbamos a fracasar, de que íbamos a fracasar una vez más. Pero había que intentarlo, debíamos de intentarlo. Estábamos en el espacio-tiempo en el que tocaba tomar decisiones y tratar de ponerlo en marcha, ¿no?
Tú estuviste, Rogelio, muy cercano a este proyecto desde el principio. ¿Qué nos puedes contar desde tu lado cuando estos locos vienen y te comentan estas cosas?
Bueno, a ver, siempre hay gente que tiene ideas. Hay que agradecer, y la idea es de Andoni, también estaba en su momento con él, haciendo tándem siempre Dani, ¿no? Y luego hay gente que pues a veces tenemos menos ideas, pero que tenemos, no sé si la facultad o no, la capacidad de intentar que ciertas ideas se hagan realidad. No digo que nosotros como AZTI seamos expertos en hacer eso, que también dejamos muchas cosas por el camino y también tenemos ideas que no somos capaces de transformar. Pero bueno, yo creo que Andoni ha puesto algunas cosas que ahí aparece el primer número en el 2012, pero todo esto empezó en el 2006, es decir, fueron 6 años para dar de alguna manera vida a ese niño, no fue un parto ni tan siquiera de un elefante, casi dio tiempo a que nacieran varias generaciones de elefantes, ¿no? Y tuvo que ver al principio, cuando empezábamos a hablar, Andoni se acordará que nos encontrábamos, que hablábamos el mismo idioma, pero no nos entendíamos. Hablaban de esto me gustaría que fuera más viscoso. Y nosotros preguntamos, ya, pero ¿cuántos centipoises? En ese Andoni se ríe, pero yo recuerdo esa anécdota, ¿no? En ese lenguaje nos dábamos cuenta que la ciencia, que habitualmente en el mundo de la alimentación siempre ha mirado más al food tech, al food science y más focalizado en cambios de qué pasa con los alimentos o temas relacionados con transformaciones. No había mirado el mundo de la gastronomía, y en la gastronomía al final no deja de ser todo un proceso de reacciones químicas, reacciones enzimáticas, presión, temperatura, mezcla de ingredientes que se favorecen, pues que se desarrollen texturas o desarrollen al final toda una serie de efectos que detrás de ellos, aunque Andoni siempre nos decía, nosotros hacemos mucha prueba y error, recuerdo que era ese planteamiento. Al final, sin que él se lo diera cuenta, había bastante método científico detrás. Entonces, eso nos animó a entender que había una parte del conocimiento científico que se estaba perdiendo porque la ciencia, y en este caso me miro con autocrítica y una autocrítica muy profunda en el sentido de que no estabas viendo al mundo de los cocineros o de los chefs como persona capaz de hacer ciencia. Siempre al final tienes que mirarte y decir, bueno, este tiene bata blanca y si me permite la expresión, pues si tiene bata blanca es de mi gremio y este sí hace ciencia, ¿no? Cuando nos dimos cuenta que no, que realmente detrás había mucha ciencia, es más, nos abren las mentes y las ideas, ¿no? El problema es que uno miraba el mundo de la ciencia y no se encontraba más que revistas, como he dicho antes, más relacionadas con el food tech, con el food science. Y si nos planteamos que otra, entre comillas, demanda que alguna vez también Andoni y todo su equipo ponen encima de la mesa, es decir, la propiedad intelectual, ¿no? Es decir, alguien desarrolla una cosa, aparecen muchos libros de recetas, pero esa cierta propiedad intelectual en la generación del conocimiento se pierde. Y bueno, pues veíamos que ¿por qué no intentarlo? La publicación científica es un instrumento donde se puede reconocer el origen. La publicación te da unos derechos de reconocimiento de autor, de inventor, que además te puedes, como todo el mundo sabemos, ser reconocido y citado por otros y que eso sea la base, eso sean los hombros en los que se sumen en generaciones futuras otros cocineros, otros científicos para seguir avanzando, ¿no? La verdad es que todo esto nos parecía claro que al hacer una revista era la iniciativa para intentar dos cosas que parecían imposibles. Uno, que científicos que están mirando a las revistas de impacto dejaran de publicar allí para publicar aquí, y que cocineros que están haciendo ciencia sin que a veces lo hicieran explícitamente, ¿no? lo entendieran como tal y lo vieran como una oportunidad. Tengo que decir que todo esto, que fue una idea inicial, que le fuimos dando formas en este sentido, no hubiera sido posible, lógicamente, sin Elsevier. Elsevier al final creyó en el proyecto, nos escuchó, nos entendió. Nosotros con Elsevier pues teníamos cierta relación. Publicamos como centro de investigación y pensábamos que era la editorial de referencia a la que teníamos que dirigirnos. Tuvimos la suerte, como siempre, al final, más que las organizaciones, somos personas, ¿eh? Y la persona que dimos creyó en el proyecto. Tengo que decir que fue un proyecto en el que hemos tenido que perseverar mucho, poner muchos recursos económicos, poner personas, tiempo y liberarlas para que lo saquen adelante, porque esto no debe ser imposible. Hacer una labor de captación, y tú, Juan Carlos, sabes mucho de ello, ¿no? de captar a gente que quisiera publicar. Una labor comercial de puerta a puerta para que esto empezara a tener sentido y contenido y empezara a crecer.
Hay una parte importante que se refleja en la diapositiva, ¿no? Lo que es la creación de la comunidad que existía, pero que igual no eran demasiado conscientes. Aquí ha habido también un esfuerzo importante, ¿no? De aglutinar y de convencer a la gente para que se uniese a este proyecto. Andoni, ¿qué nos dices?
Bueno, yo fíjate, pienso que iluso de mí, yo en un inicio pensé que esto era poco más o menos que algo que cambiaría el mundo de la cocina. O sea, le iba a generar una aportación, una herramienta extraordinaria, un poco recogiendo las palabras de Rogelio, ¿no? Para poder realmente reclamar todos esos esfuerzos extraordinarios que muchas veces se hacen para conseguir avanzar en algo. Y yo pensaba que realmente esto se iba a acoger con bueno, pues poco más o menos como lo que es, como una herramienta que nos cambia de nivel. O sea, coge una actividad que es la cocina y salta a otro universo, ¿no? Un universo donde hay otras disciplinas que ya están ahí trabajando y tú podías casi de alguna manera equipararte a ellos, ¿no? Bueno, pues resulta que no fue tan fácil. Y de hecho, Juan Carlos, tú que estás desde el principio, sabes lo que hubo que trabajar para realmente coger a cocineros que estaban haciendo proyectos interesantes con investigadores, pero también, sobre todo, ya sabemos cómo funciona el mundo, para activar el deseo de cocineros de mucho renombre que también nos hacían falta porque tenían la sensibilidad, o entendíamos que tenían la sensibilidad y la capacidad para realmente ayudarnos a que todo esto, que no hay que olvidarse, que es un proyecto de futuro para todo un sector o para muchos sectores, realmente se consolidara, ¿no? Mover la rueda fue mucho más complicado, mucho más complicado de lo que nos podemos imaginar, ¿no? Por eso, a ver, yo estoy tan eufórico, permitirme que esté eufórico, porque hemos vivido una situación en la que no es que pensábamos que la rueda iba a costar moverla, es que la rueda no se movía, prácticamente no se movía.
Sí, la rueda ahora se mueve y se mueve muy exitosamente. Vamos a avanzar un poco en el tiempo. Años después llega un nuevo promotor también, desde el campo más académico, universitario, concretamente desde el Basque Culinary Center. Es ahí donde unos años después se inicia también la andadura con este nuevo promotor, este nuevo partner. Para hablar de ello tenemos también a José Mari Aisega, director del Basque Culinary Center. Hola José Mari, buenas tardes.
Hola, muy buenas. Arratsaldeon, buenas tardes. Good afternoon to everybody.
Cuéntanos con tu propia experiencia, ¿cómo recibiste esta unión a este proyecto, a esta revista? Cuéntanos lo que supuso para una entidad como el Basque Culinary Center formar parte de este proyecto, por favor.
Bueno, yo creo que de alguna forma Basque Culinary Center como centro académico dedicado a las ciencias gastronómicas, yo creo que se basó en su creación en todo el desarrollo previo de la cocina moderna, de la cocina contemporánea, ¿no? De todo lo que los chefs y centros de investigación como AZTI habían estado haciendo previamente, yo diría, expandiendo las fronteras de la cocina, ¿no? Y creo que durante muchos años la cocina contemporánea fue evolucionando y esa evolución está en el germen, en la razón de crear un centro académico dedicado a la gastronomía como es Basque Culinary Center, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, ese es un poco el origen. Y claro, cuando tú creas un centro universitario dedicado a las ciencias gastronómicas, diseñas un grado en gastronomía con una formación interdisciplinar, piensas en desarrollar una oferta de másters también con esta vocación interdisciplinar. Claro, para nosotros, cuando conectamos con Andoni y con Rogelio, que son patronos y fundadores del Basque Culinary Center, claro, la revista fue un proyecto en el que desde el principio la implicación del Basque Culinary Center era natural. Era donde un proyecto que ya estaba lanzado, donde nosotros nos sumábamos con el objetivo de aportar una plataforma académica para contribuir a su desarrollo, ¿no? Y yo creo que yo me acuerdo muy bien esto que estaba diciendo Andoni del trabajo impresionante que se hacía de casi ir a generar cada artículo científico que se quería publicar, cómo empezamos a aportar también nuestras redes poco a poco, de hacer llegar y hacer conocer la revista en el mundo académico. Y la verdad que sí, en estos 10 años, pues cómo hemos ido paso a paso dotándole de, yo diría, una consistencia también académica, ¿no? De que la gente entienda que si tú estás haciendo un máster de ciencias gastronómicas, pues puedes publicar un paper en la revista. Si eres un profesional que estás trabajando, también, ¿no?, damos a conocer que puedes publicar un paper en la revista. Entonces, la verdad que ha sido un proceso muy bonito, la verdad. Juan Carlos, no te escuchamos.
Perdón, Rogelio, hablamos de esa parte académica, pero hay una parte científica también importante. ¿Cómo consideras tú esta revista que impacta de alguna forma en el sector más científico?
Bueno, las revistas en general, las revistas científicas, siempre lo que leemos es el pasado, es decir, es el trabajo hecho en los últimos meses, en los últimos años. Y está claro que si ahora la revista está donde está y ha conseguido el índice de impacto que todos vemos, es consecuencia del trabajo excepcional que se han ido haciendo desde lógicamente, por parte de algunos científicos que han entendido que la ciencia en la gastronomía, que empezó de alguna manera cuando los seres humanos buscaban de alguna manera conservar alimentos porque no había manera de tener comida todos los días, y ahí se empezaron a hacer procesos de manera intuitiva, ¿no? Pero a producir fermentaciones, a producir secos salados, cosas que al final había ciencia y que al final, consecuencia de ello, se transformaban y se generaban una serie de productos o características organolépticas y que han formado parte de la cultura gastronómica a lo largo de los años. Era importante entender y conocer el porqué de esas cosas. Yo creo que la ciencia, desde mi punto de vista, está viendo que hay una clara oportunidad de entender el porqué y el para qué de muchas cosas que forman parte de la gastronomía actual, pero sobre todo de la gastronomía del futuro, y que poniendo más conocimiento al servicio de esa ciencia podemos tener mejores soluciones más saludables que ayuden al bienestar en general de las personas, porque pocas cosas hacemos todos los días, como es el comer y disfrutar de la comida, en el cual la gastronomía, evidentemente, en la medida que conozcamos más las oportunidades que nos ofrece desde cómo trabajar desde la ciencia para mejorar los procesos gastronómicos, va a ser una oportunidad que cada vez más se mire desde el mundo de la ciencia en la generación y aportar de conocimiento para el futuro. En una revista específicamente que vincula ambos mundos y con algo de impacto, pues va a ser fundamental para atraer cada vez más a más científicos, ¿no? Porque el riesgo que corríamos cuando empezamos esto también, y es un tema que hablamos mucho en el pasado, ¿no? Es decir, que la gente entendiera esto, que va a ser una revista más de food science o de food tech, de ciencia o tecnología de los alimentos. Y aquí estamos hablando de algo más. Por supuesto que hay ciencia, alimentos y tecnología, pero es buscar la conexión desde ese mundo de la ciencia, mirando cómo mejorar los procesos gastronómicos. Y eso al final va a hacer y va a traer a más conocimiento, y más conocimiento va a ayudarnos a ser mejores como revista, por supuesto, pero sobre todo a desarrollar mejores soluciones para el futuro.
Perfecto. Permitirme cambiar el idioma. Vamos a presentar ahora a Morgan. Always behind our journal, we have the publishers behind. Let me introduce you Morgan Dagot, the publisher of this journal. Good evening, Morgan.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi, good. So as you said, I will be speaking in English. So
Yep.
if anyone wants to hear the presentation in the, because I understand it's down below, right? They can change the language and hear the traduction.
Yeah. We are always talking about the impact factor, but maybe not everybody knows exactly what does it mean. Could you explain it to us, please?
Exactly. So here on these slides, you've got the calculation behind the impact factor. But the impact factor itself is all held by one company called Clarivate Analytics. So the name is here in the corner of this slide. And basically, they are the one receiving all the application from all of the journals worldwide to then give an impact factor. And that's why it's very difficult, because every single journal, and that thousands of them across all of the disciplines, will be asking this one company for an impact factor. They've got very strict criteria, obviously. Some of them are listed there. The number of articles you have to have per year, the experts you've got on the board of your journal, the quality of your article, and everything is checked very thoroughly. So if for one of your articles something's not right, they can reject you. And if that's the case, then you don't have an impact factor for 2 years and you prevent it from applying. So that's why this very first step is really difficult to get. And as you can see, the impact factor is calculated over the previous years of the journal. So as we were saying, you already need 3 years of existence of publishing article, of being cited before even applying to have an impact factor. So this impact factor that we've got now is taking into account the citation of article from 2017 and 2018, divided by the number of citable items. So what we call the citables is the research papers, so the review paper, the research paper. But for example, if we publish the name of the editorial board, that's not going to be cited, right? And that's why it gets difficult, because Clarivate has really strict definition of what's citable and what's not. And sometimes they don't tell us. So we do have ways of trying to calculate the impact factor, but it's rarely exactly the same to what they do. So there is this bit of mystery around the impact factor, and Clarivate Analytics, who is taking really the lead on this. They are owner of the impact factor, and that's why it's so difficult to get one. So in the field of publishing, we've been working on, perhaps there are other metrics that should be taken into account, to measure the validity of an article. Why do we have to wait 3 years? Or do we do then? And some of them are here. So for example, the site score is a way to calculate like this, but it's very clear and transparent what is taken into account for the calculation. We also have Plumix, which is more recent metric that shows the interaction with, I want to say the real world, like the world outside of academia. So not just citation of your work, but how many people clicked on it, viewed it, liked it on Twitter, for example, downloaded it. So you can really see the impact thanks to Plumix on, regular people and not just scientists in the lab doing another study and citing your paper. So this highlights again how important the impact factor is. Then if you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, here it is. So this slide shows already the impact of that impact factor, if you will, because we got this impact factor in 2020, and you can see that today, I think this data is from end of September actually, we have received twice as much submission to the journal than the whole full year of 2019. And that's because in academia, very often scientists are even prevented to publish in journals without an impact factor. That's also a reason why we are trying to have other metrics, because then for any journal, scientists can't submit because they're sometimes forbidden because you don't have an impact factor. But if you don't have an impact factor, then you can't get submission. So it's really like this circle. So here I'm very proud to say, the toughest is done, really. We got the impact factor. Scientists are starting to see the journal more, and they're free to publish in there. So it's really, I think 2020 is the beginning of a good thing for the journal, at least. So this is really good to see. Trying to move on to the next. Yeah, here it is. So this is just showing the site score, which was the other evaluation. And we can see already, with impact factor, you just have one this year, but with site score, you can already see how the journal has improved since its creation. And here on this graph, I compared it to really the only journal that's somewhat similar as I could find, because once again, this is a very unique journal. And it's really showing how we're becoming, bigger, more important, and of higher quality in the field. So I think something that's also tricky for this journal is that because it's so unique and there is not much, in gastronomy and culinary arts, these big companies that are handling all these journals, they don't know where to put it. So here we've got, for example, the categories of cultural studies and food science. It's in both. And you can see here, it's on cultural studies, there are more than 1,000 journals. And actually this one is in the top of them. So it's really good to see. In food science, it's the first half, because out of these 300 journals, we've got these big ones that have been here in the field for 30 years. So it's really interesting to see, it's a bit of a journal that's out of the boxes. So how are we going to be evaluating it? So I think now with the impact factor, it's really a first step towards even more growth and even more quality. Here we go. So this is just an example of the most cited article for the journal. And something that I can put your interest on is the fact that the top ones are open access, which means, as I can explain in the next slide, that people can access this type of article freely. So in the scholarly journal, we've got two models. One is what we call the subscription, where authors can publish for free. And if you want to read it, you have to have a subscription to this journal, like a membership. But with open access, it's the other way around. The author or the funder or the university pay to publish, and then everyone everywhere can access your article for free. So with this journal, we actually have both models, so we can give the choice to the authors. You can choose one or the other. effectively with open access, there is often more visibility. And things that we see with open access as well is the downloads on Science Direct. So these slides really show the readers of the journal. Because again, when we discuss impact factor, it's really about, the scientists that are doing themselves a lab and cite your article. But it doesn't mean it's not read otherwise. Here, you can see in 1,000, like almost 300,000 for the first one, is really a lot of people are reading this article, downloading them, and because they have access to the entire article, it's really interesting for them. And I think that's something the panelists were saying earlier. It's not just for scientists. There are also chefs in their kitchen, or even, I don't know, if anyone wants to be is interested in culinary. I know like some regular people are really interested in gastronomy, and they can go there and read it. A lot of food scientists can go beyond and find access on Science Direct, find these articles and read them. So it's really interesting to see the very high number of downloads for these articles. And again, that's a reflection of quality, even more so than the impact factor. And something that I just wanted to quickly mention is the fact that, again, this is an international journal. So I know it started with, a small ID in the Basque country, but look at that. Like, this is all the countries that are downloading, again, like reading all the articles of the journals. There are so many in the United States, in China even. You can see, again, thousands of downloads from the article of the journal. So this has really expanded in a huge international initiative. And I'm really hoping that now that we've got an impact factor, we will start also receiving submission from these countries and chefs from around there. So again, that's my last slide. I don't want to take too much time, but this is to come back to the polemics that I was saying at the beginning. We can see gastronomy as a lot of interest outside of science, even outside of cooking. And a lot of people are interacting, online with these topics because they find it interesting and finding it exciting. So yeah, thank you for hearing me. I hope the translation part worked very well, but I want to say that I'm very honored to be here today. And I was happy to present this and happy to discuss further. If anyone has any question for me, do not hesitate to type them in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for the nice explanation. Voy a hablar otra vez en castellano. La diapositiva no nos acompaña, no sé qué problemas de tipo técnico hay, pero antes de cerrar esta primera parte, me gustaría que todos los ponentes pudiesen hablar o discutir abiertamente sobre el futuro de esta interacción ciencia y gastronomía. ¿Cómo lo veis? ¿Qué creéis que puede pasar o qué beneficios puede traer para la sociedad y para los dos sectores? ¿Quién se atreve? José Mari, que tienes el micro abierto.
Bueno, a ver, yo creo que, por una parte, cuando hablamos de gastronomía, yo creo que esta revista nos ayuda a expandir lo que significa la gastronomía, su contribución, y también introducir con fuerza la dimensión científica en el desarrollo de la gastronomía. Creo que durante todos estos años los chefs y centros de investigación, profesionales han ido desarrollando toda una actividad, pero yo sí creo que nosotros desde el Basque Culinary Center lo vemos, ¿no? Que, por ejemplo, graduados de otras disciplinas empiezan a sentirse atraídos por la gastronomía, no desde el ámbito, si quieres, más culinario profesional, sino desde el ámbito científico y de la innovación. Lo vemos, por ejemplo, en un máster de ciencias gastronómicas que tenemos, o incluso lo vemos en un doctorado de ciencias gastronómicas que el año pasado pusimos en marcha en colaboración con AZTI y con Necker, que es otro centro de investigación que está aquí en el País Vasco. Entonces, yo sí creo que esto nos ayuda, la revista nos ayuda a darle una dimensión mucho mayor a la gastronomía, que tiene muchas facetas. Yo diría que desde Basque Culinary Center estamos como comprometidos con una visión 360 grados de la gastronomía. Y lo que acaba de contar Morgan de cómo la revista está siendo consultada en todo el mundo por investigadores, profesionales, mundo científico, nos ayuda a ampliar las fronteras. Y como decía antes Rogelio, y termino ya, claro, entendiendo que la gastronomía tiene que ver con comida deliciosa, metemos el elemento saludable, el elemento sostenible, claro, es que creo que tiene un potencial de desarrollo futuro muy importante y creo que la revista como un instrumento de difusión científica va a ser muy relevante y muy importante y trabajaremos para hacerla crecer, sin duda.
Perfecto. Rogelio.
Sí, compartiendo y ampliando un poco lo que acaba de decir José Mari. A ver, yo creo que el vínculo entre ciencia y gastronomía, y estamos hablando del 2020, no miro al 2006 cuando empezamos con estas ideas, sobre todo cuando empezó Andoni y todo su equipo, es un camino que no tiene vuelta atrás. Yo creo que desde el mundo de la ciencia claramente se ha visto que puede contribuir y generar conocimiento nuevo. Me han sorprendido muy gratamente los datos que ha presentado Morgan, el que esté en el primer cuartil en el área de cultura y bueno, está en el cuartil 2 en el área de food science. Bueno, pues indica de alguna manera que hay esa atracción ya. Es un camino, como decía, que no tiene vuelta atrás, pero sobre todo es un camino hacia el futuro que en la medida que consigamos que este índice de impacto y seguir progresando va a ser un punto de mayor atracción para atraer a más ciencia, porque al final ya sabéis, dime cómo me mides y te diré cómo actúo. Y en este caso yo creo que el mundo científico quizás no estaba mirando a este enfoque, ¿no? que supone la gastronomía y avanzar en todo lo que supone el incorporar nuevo conocimiento. Va a ser un atractivo y la revista, si lo seguimos haciendo bien y seguimos teniendo artículos, una muy buena selección por los editores, la revisión de los mismos y vamos consiguiendo ir avanzando, cada vez nos vamos a poder encontrar con crecimientos más exponenciales, no en cuanto al número de artículos, y no estoy hablando de cuánto hizo impacto, sino la contribución de conocimientos del mundo de la ciencia y del mundo de la gastronomía, haciendo un mix, que de alguna manera, que igual que se produce en otras áreas de la ciencia, este cruce de mundos en el que el salto cualitativo en la generación y aportación de valor a ambos, yo creo que va a ser impresionante.
Muchas gracias. Andoni, ¿tienes algo que añadir?
Bueno, tres ideas simples, ¿no? La primera es que quizá lo más extraordinario, lo importante es que por poner un ejemplo, ¿no? Los alumnos del Basque Culinary Center tienen un mecanismo, una plataforma, una herramienta para poder trabajar y para poder presentar sus proyectos, ¿no? Esto que ellos afortunadamente lo van a ver como con algo natural y obvio y es lógico, pues quizás esta sea la conquista, ¿no? De que ellos ya lo van a naturalizar con una rapidez extraordinaria. La segunda idea sería que esto es un proyecto de todos, es un proyecto de la gente que ama el conocimiento, de la gente del mundo, de todo el mundo, del planeta entero, que desea tener mecanismos donde poder presentar, desarrollar, explicar y compartir en lo que está trabajando, ¿no? Quizás es lo más interesante. Y la tercera idea será que lo más extraordinario y lo mejor que nos puede pasar es que nunca nadie sepa ni qué es Mugaritz, ni de dónde vinimos, ni qué es AZTI, ni qué es el Basque Culinary, sino simplemente que todo este proyecto que hemos conseguido ponerlo a disposición del mundo, la gente se lo apropia, ¿no? Creo que lo estamos consiguiendo, creo que va a suceder, está sucediendo, y en el fondo aquí ganaremos todos. Porque yo creo que tenemos que dar ejemplo de proyectos en el que pensemos desde esa visión soñadora de que somos capaces de generar futuro.
Muchas gracias, Andoni. Muchas gracias. Bueno, muchísimas gracias a los cuatro. Vamos a seguir avanzando en esta presentación. Vamos a volver otra vez. We're going to come back to the origins. Just to get into a more detail, just to give you an idea about the timeline. We started, as far as I remember, Andoni and Rogelio can correct me, but we started in 2008 with the very first idea when Mugaritz expressed the need just to have a journal. It was a first publication outside of the journal because it didn't exist. So we started from Mugaritz and AZTI. We published one paper in about science and gastronomy and food biophysics, I remember. And there, in that year, we had the first meeting in Oxford with Elsevier, and we started to participate in different networks. That Indaga is a Spanish network. It's a group of universities and research centers that they were just discussing between science and gastronomy. Jorge Ruiz and Purificación García and so many others like Fundación Alicia. In 2009, we started to define 3 different areas, and we started to make the editorial board. There was a second meeting with Elsevier to start talking about really publishing the first volume. And in 2010, we started to begin to do the issue number 1, but constructing first of all the number 0. And in 2011, we carry on. We realized that publishing a whole paper was kind of difficult for the culinary sector. So we started to talk about a short communication that it does exist in the scientific world. And we propose this kind of short communication explaining culinary concept from chefs. We did some internal editorial process just to start. We carry on taking into account this, the journal Flavor. It started in 2012. It was a really good publications in that journal. In 2013, we carry on with the editorial process. We built a sustainability plan, communication plan, and just to be ready for the next volume. If you see, the launch of the first volume was in January 2012, and the launch of the second volume was 1 year later. And if we carry on with the time, we see that in 2016, Elsevier started to own the journal, and you can see the launch of the different volumes that increased dramatically. Nowadays, the number of submissions every day is really high, so we can be happy about that. And we started in that year, we started to change the editorial, the associates, increasing the number of associate editors too. But we have here another co-editor in chief, Dani Lassa. Hello, Dani Lassa, how are you? Hello? Are you there, Dani?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you remember those days, could you explain us the main reasons why we decided just to do this kind of journal?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I would like to congratulate everybody around this, let's say, virtual table. I would like to greet Rogelio, Andoni, Jose Mari, let's say, and Morgan, the previous testifiers, because I think that this is a very long process. This is 12-year-long process, and I think that in the current world, this wouldn't happen at all. 12 years is something very, very long. We have been, let's say, supporting in order nowadays everybody to see that this is something normal, okay? But as you were asking in the beginning, the need for a magazine, okay, it was kind of something crazy, as Andoni introduced before. But we should remember that we began our relationship with AZTI-Tecnalia in 2004. And we began talking to scientists, you were among them, Juan Carlos, in 2004-05. And although we saw that there were a lot of possibilities, the first thing we realized that we should overcome was our difficulty in understanding each other. because there was, let's say, a difference in culture, there was a difference in language, but there was an undeniable interest in both of the sides to cooperate, because we knew that altogether we had an incredible power. If we go to something like, let's say, practice, we would say that we had in Mugaritz a research area that in 2004 was something kind of unique, apart from few restaurants in all around the world. And all the phenomena we used to see in the food, but not just in food, because it seems that we are talking just about food science. And as we will see with Charles later on, the science behind food is not only behind food, but behind the people that eats and behaves around food. So apart from doing something good and many mistakes, we wanted to succeed in a language on which we could gather all the information correctly, and we could have like correct chats and conversations with you scientists in order to take gastronomy forward. Nowadays, in 2020, it seems very normal to have a university, to have something on which science is a common language, but in the old days, this was something impossible. If I should say what we battled for, this was to embrace a language we didn't have. We were working in, let's say, in an empiric world. The chefs, we used to work based on empiric powers, just based on our senses and what we were able to extract from that. And we saw, and I remember Rogelio, Antonio, and you, Juan Carlos, and Inigo, everybody talking about the scientific method we didn't have. And this is something very, very important, because chefs, we didn't have scientific method in order to clear the hypothesis we were launching every day. But again, and as you can see in the pictures here, we were facing big congresses, big events on which you could find chefs stating, I wouldn't say dangerous, but I don't know, some statements that they were not that real. And Andoni very often talks about the historical memory we have. And we didn't have the arena or the magazine or place where to gather all the knowledge we had in cuisine. And you scientists offered us the arena, that was the magazine, to begin adding the knowledge we had in our backwards. So that was the reason why we began with the magazine, because we needed somehow, as Rogelio said before, we didn't have the copyright, we didn't have the patents. We should have something to protect our knowledge. El Bulli used to publish all the recipes every year, and we couldn't understand why the hell they were doing that. And they used to do that because that was the only way to protect their knowledge, just publishing. And we found a parallel way. And this was the scientific method and the magazine. And as you can see, we were talking about 2008, 2012, the first magazine. That's quite a long effort.
It wasn't easy at all, Danny. If you remember, we had to travel around the world just to visit some places, different restaurants, like Osteria Francescana con Massimo Bottura. We went to the Fat Duck with Heston Blumenthal. We went to Matt Leitner in New York. We went to see to Alex Atala in Dom in Brazil. We went to Lima to see Gaston Acurio. What do you remember from those days, Danny?
Okay, I remember a very exciting moment because these names you were remembering now, they were the avant-garde in 2010, let's say. And I think that Andoni coincides with me. I remember a lot of meetings in different hotel halls before our meeting, before our conference, before or after our conference, while we were drinking a beer, just confronting, I don't know, Wiley Dufresne or Seiji Yamamoto or I don't know, Davide Cassi or anybody. We were kind of stalkers. We were taking people behind and we were wondering or asking them, are you interested in this kind of magazine? And it's very funny because everybody used to say, yes, I agree. That's a very good idea. But the conversation used to end there because they pretty knew that that was something Herculean. It was kind of impossible to achieve. But everybody knew that that was very, very needed. And okay, let's say that we finally achieved that. I remember a lot of discussions with Harold Magui, with Benedict Boger, with Davide Cassi, with Tony Massanet, with Pere Castells, a lot of people just discussing about the aims and scopes, what the hell gastronomy means, whether it was too broad knowledge, we should do it smaller. A lot of discussion until we agreed on a starting point. We don't know where we will finish. We knew that a beginning was needed. That was the bravery.
Yeah, lots of work there. This slide is just putting the highlights of some meeting with these people, Harold Magui, Eric van der Linden, Benedict Boger, trying to see or to explore the highlights, the actions that we needed just to carry on with the journal. Yeah, just one question for, I think that Joseph is there. Joseph Youssef is an associate editor. He owns the Kitchen Theory in London. Because it seems quite clear that why a scientist must publish. But I would like to ask you why a chef should publish in a scientific format.
First of all, hello everyone, pleasure to be here. Well, you know, I think everyone's kind of covered this idea that as chefs, you up until recently, it's very difficult, I guess, if you're trying to be innovative or coming up with new ideas to in some way protect those ideas. And I guess as chefs, we come from an industry that maybe used to be very secretive at one point, and maybe people didn't like sharing recipes. And, you know, I think even, you know, I'm not so old, but even within my generation that existed where, you know, you were only given a recipe if you were on the right section and that's what you were meant to be doing. And I think then we've gone into a time where you can find pretty much any recipe anywhere online. And so, you know, chefs as well, we need to catch up with that in some way and find a way of formalizing perhaps, you know, that process, or being able to in some way protect the intellectual property that goes with the art and the creativity that we generate. Yeah, thank you, Joseph. We could just give some examples of papers that we can find. You publish quite a lot, Joseph. You could just talk about yours. Yeah, probably one of the best examples would be the paper that we published with Charles on jellyfish and looking at the kind of sustainable possibilities of it. And I think that kind of speaks to the strengths of the journal, looking at not only kind of coming up with, and what Danny was talking about, not only coming up with kind of interesting recipes, but also the applications of these ideas and how you can actually bring them into turning sustainable ingredients into something delicious and gastronomic. And I think this is exactly what the journal is about, is kind of being able to bring these ideas out into the forefront, but also have, I guess, some ownership over these ideas and have a sense of kind of that you're protecting these ideas. Yeah. Danny, do you want to give some examples too? We have here in the slide some works like this one.
Sure, we could go a little, but let's go fast in order to see like the variety of the articles. But again, I repeat, this happened in 2011. 10 years ago. And nowadays, just to see David Chang, Daniel Felder, Daniel Burns, in the first issue, talking about microbial terroir, that if you put these hot topics on the table nowadays, it's still a hot topic. I don't know, I get excited, you know? It's incredible how these people, while they were running Momofuku, they were publishing this very article. In this case, I think maybe, I don't know who's the audience, but in 2011, 2012, Nordic people publishing in this very magazine about fermented food, how you could obtain nucleotides, free glutamate, talking about umami, how the senses work while something is fermenting. It's incredible.
There are other kind of articles. Well, everybody can just visit the page, but I mean, about different kind of topics like nettle cheese and...
This one from Carlos, the one previous. It was very important, I think, for the Basque Culinary Center because it was the first publication from Basque Culinary Center. It was a collaboration in between chefs and scientists, just talking about how urtica dioica can help to do cheese. But where the hell you are going to begin? We cannot do like sci-fi. We should talk about what's going on in food and cheese. So that was beautiful. And this was about our colleague, Ramon, working with the people in AZTI, in microbiology, in fungi, in food. I think that, as Joseph said before, it's important that these kind of things used to end in the table in the restaurant. So this was not just lab, but restaurant work also.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to just to stop here to introduce Charles Spence, and Professor Charles Spence from University of Oxford. Hello. Hi, Charles. It's just because your name is here. Because I mean, I'm just talking about the new incorporations of new associate editors, and was one Joseph, like Joseph, Julian, and yourself. And you publish quite a lot of publications too. This one, I think that we could see that the number of downloads it's really huge. I think that the impact in England with different newspapers was really big too. What do you think of this article and your role in the journal?
Yeah, it's been a pleasing outcome for this article, as was mentioned earlier. Probably the open access element radically transforms who accesses it, your work, and that may be especially important in this kind of between disciplinary area. And I don't suppose many chefs have subscriptions to all that many technical journals, so the price becomes prohibitive to download articles. Yeah, I'm sort of, I guess, a lucky one that I couldn't care less about impact factor. So it allowed me to publish in the journal in a way that my colleagues sometimes can't, are prevented from, and or choose not to. So for the many people like that out there, I guess it'll be interesting to see how the addition of an impact factor then changes their behavior or their thinking. Though to the extent that those scientists, at least, who either are not allowed or can't stop thinking about impact factor, if that's their motivation, then it's kind of a, what would you call it, a dog eat dog, or a competition for who's got the highest impact factor. And so while a comparison with International Journal of Culinary Technology, whatever it was, makes this journal look good, I would think that if one compared to other food science, sensory science journals, then people would go elsewhere first, just because they'll say, what's got the highest number in this category? Okay, food quality and preference has, I think, 5 or something. Food Research International is probably 4 or 5. And then so I guess they'll start there. And then maybe the danger is they'll work their way down. So whether you end up with more, how should I put this politely, rubbish, things that nobody else wants to publish, but by some group who are sensitive to the importance of impact factor, is kind of the concern. And that I guess the way I see it is that, as was mentioned earlier, there is a point of differentiation here about the gastronomy, about the link to chefs and real world cooking. So that's a unique selling point. I think now that flavors disappeared some years ago. And that sets this apart from those others, Food Research International, Journal of Sensory Studies, Food Quality Preference, so on and so forth. So maybe we should make more of that, and not try, for my opinion, not try and compete in the oversubscribed areas, maybe like, I don't know, sensory analysis, for which there are other journals specified for that with higher impact already. And I just, yeah, I'm not a chef, so I can't say, but my feeling is many of those sort of bore me senseless. And I'd imagine the chef's feeling might be the same. But then it gets into maybe an area of what emphasis is appropriate. I would like marketing to be in there. I know some of my editorial colleagues think definitely not. And that's just, so be it. I might think, a bit more food history and anthropology. And again, that might be slightly divisive. But maybe pushing more in those slightly more unique areas and perhaps trying to position ourselves away from, this has food science in the title, but the gastronomy comes first. And unless you can say there's something of interest to or for gastronomy, then perhaps this isn't the right place. And from the on the ground perspective, I hate to think how many Juan Carlos gets and desk rejects, but in those country by country things, there was a lot of Turkey in there, which is nice to see. All the world subscribing, but it feels that things that are coming out of some of those countries, Brazil, Turkey, is primarily that obviously they're great chefs there, but they're not ones that I think we're in communication with or are part of that sort of scientific revolution yet. But instead, there are a lot of food, technology, sensory science institutions in those very large countries submitting a very large number of papers that maybe could wear an editor-in-chief down, having to deal with them.
It's I mean, as you can see, it's a big debate within the associates talking about the aims and scope. As you say, Charles, gastronomy is a very broad concept, and you can include completely different disciplines like anthropology, cooking itself, history, sociology, and then we have the food science. So I think that it is interesting to say that within the associates we have already a big debate about the aims and scope of the journal. It is a shame that Jorge is not here, just to debate a little bit more about that. Let us just go further.
Maybe one other thought then would be, so if you say, okay, now we're in the impact factor game, that's great, and we have a small but rising impact factor, then how best to increase that, given that will then hopefully attract more people. Then what I see other journals doing is either having special issues, so like a multi-sensory research is one journal that's sort of low impact as well, perception research, but then they would organize special issues, which can then help to attract in good speakers. And then also do maybe a bit more kind of a current opinion or a review, and they sort of try and make sure that the authors then refer to the articles in the journal.
Yep.
And if you can't do that, why are you publishing in the journal? And if you do that, then that helps the impact factor to go up. And then some of those, current topics or a review of the latest in X might then provide a way of referencing some of those recent papers on fungi terroir or whatever it might be.
Yep. Some maybe the main reason just to reject publications, you were mentioned before some publications from Turkey or Brazil, and most of them are very focused on food science only. and that's not included in the aim and scopes of the journal, and that's one of the main reasons. But before, we have another guy here, another associate editor, Julián Otero. Are you there?
Hello, everyone.
Trying to retain the history. If you remember, we increased the number of associates, Charles and Joseph included, and then you were there also, and you did quite a nice work trying to get a bigger editorial board, trying to represent other disciplines like anthropology, history, sociology.
Yes, first of all, I think gastronomy has to be very differentiated from food science, because food science studies only the food, the product itself, but gastronomy is about, it is beyond that. It's about the context, it's about the experience that is near that product. And I think this interdisciplinarity that has the journal is very important to enhance our knowledge. So first of all, chefs has a problem that it's very complicated to publish by itself because they don't have enough tools to write like a scientific paper. But nowadays we have universities like Basque Center or others that encourage young chefs and new generations to publish and to see that interdisciplinarity in the gastronomy. So it's very important to see these different point of views, the chef point of view and the chef point of view, but not, as Rogelio said at the beginning of this intervention, that the typical with the white cloth scientist that everyone has in mind, because there's a lot of different scopes. We can work with anthropologists, we can work with historians, we can work with sociologists, and even with architects, and even with artists. Because one thing that we don't realize, that one chef can publish about a new technique or a new recipe. It's possible to do that, and it's very important because add knowledge to the publication. But it's also important to do that with the help of other people that are used to publish in other papers.
Okay, thank you, Julian. I feel like we started the open discussion, and I think that we can, yes, we have some minutes to go, and we can discuss about the future. I would like just to know the opinion of Danny, Joseph, Charles, Julian, about the future of the journal and the future of this interaction between science and gastronomy. Science, all kind of science. Who wants to start?
Well, one thing that some other institutions like at Oxford would say for our graduates, if you publish 3 papers, you get your degree, you've qualified. So amongst the students in the Basque Culinary Centre, whether there was some component that might be encouraged, you should, as part of your studies, have 1 published paper under your belt. No one says which journal it needs to be in, but whether that might help encourage a process from an early age or in the right direction. I think that it's noticeable how some of the other food journals will then tie up with a food conference. So Food Quality and Preference has a Pangbourne Symposium every 2 years. And whether there's anything in that space, in the last 2 years for the World Chef Awards, they've had a science and cooking symposium. So there is sort of clearly interest from maybe some more culinary focused, gastronomy focused, less academic focused conferences to continue the debate and see what the other side might have to offer.
Yeah, thank you. Another one?
Well, just to quickly say, I think there's definitely more and more kind of chefs that are maybe starting to realize that this kind of a journal exists and this kind of literature exists, because it is very, very different from the world that we come from, kind of writing in this academic way, even if it is a more casual style, or if it is kind of more of an opinion piece than an actual piece of research. But I think we're going to see more and more now, because of the, you know, it's kind of almost because of the existence of the journal, that you'll see more of this happen, where because chefs are exposed to this idea that because I guess we get a lot of chefs who collaborate with scientists, but how many chefs are actually writing papers with scientists? And so I'm sure because of the existence of this kind of a journal, and because of its kind of growing popularity, that we are going to see more chefs that will actually, rather than just kind of using the research, will actually take part in not only the research, but in the kind of publication of it as well.
Yep. Thank you. Very interesting. Another one, Danny, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that as Charles was saying, I think it was very, very interesting it would be very interesting. Every time we go to the Basque Culinary Center, we always ask about, is there anybody publishing? And you always say yes. The number is increasing. But as he suggested, maybe there should be, let's say, a tool through which to encourage people to publish more. And I would say that nowadays when was the first year of the graduates in the Basque Culinary Center? 2014, 15? Julian?
Julian knows much better than me.
I think 2014.
14. So that means that the first graduates in the Basque Culinary Center, they have been already 6 years in their professional careers, and they somehow carry this culture they can bring to their restaurants, companies, or any other places where they are working on now. So we are in a better position nowadays. I think, as Charles was introducing, there are a lot of conferences, events, and Juan Carlos, you remember, we have been talking about the possibility to do congresses around this International Journal of Gastronomy and Food Science. So although we say that there is a good success in this magazine and in this whole history, there could be many things to be done in the future too. So while we talk about gastronomy, science, restaurants, and we gather all together, my only goal as a chef would be to increase the medium or average level of gastronomy. I would be pleased by that, okay? But that means that the top of the pyramid should be pulling up, okay? So the more we talk about the links between gastronomy and science, the better will be for the gastronomy and the restaurants themselves, okay? But actually, I've got a fear. Gastronomy is, as you said, Juan Carlos, too broad theme. So regarding to the rest of the scientists, I think sometimes they look at us kind of, okay, please make your ideas clearer and come later on, okay? I think there should be a little work done in there, because we were pleased to work with Charles in experimental psychology. That's incredible. But that article can be beside the one about Aspergillus or Isaac. So I find it a little broadened. Now we've got the magazine. Let's see what are the next steps we can do. But I understand their fear too.
Yep.
And would there be a sense in which when those first issues were mentioned and shown on screen earlier, then you had some world-leading chefs either publishing in, and a greater number on the initial board, I think I read somewhere in the past. Wouldn't it be great then to, reiterating that point, leading from the front, to have top chefs' names appearing in some way, shape or form? And as Joseph says, they're probably not going to have time or the energy to write a paper as such, but probably none of those other journals out there could potentially get a world-leading chef as an author, and whether you need a new vehicle, something like a In Conversation With. or whether it's I don't know how it is done. I think it would be important or nice to see leading from the front. Then we want to see world leading chefs authoring stuff, more of them. And that would then help to differentiate as well. And
yeah, okay, thank you. Julian, do you want to add anything else?
I think, well, Andoni said before that some chefs that has marketing and has power to publish, and some chefs has the power to publish but doesn't have marketing. So I think this is a very important point, that because when we saw the papers that were before, we saw big names published in that papers, but not only big chefs has to publish. Everyone has the potential and has new things to say. I remember once a very interesting paper talking about Balinese marrying. That was a new technique from a chef from Bali that nobody knows. But the idea of trying to explain a new technique and trying to explain a new way of doing a marrying was very interesting, and was a very interesting paper. And I think we have to encourage all the people that are seeing us now to publish, because any idea can be published.
Thank you. Andoni, I see you there. Do you want to add anything else?
Realmente no, ya lo habéis dicho todo. Estoy como un cochino en brazos, que no sé cómo va a arreglarse la traductora para explicar esto. Pero no, estoy muy feliz de participar en un proyecto de futuro con gente a la que aprecio, tan extraordinaria. O sea, de verdad, no sé, muchísimas gracias a todos, y esto nos supera a todos, o sea, nos supera. Estamos pensando, yo quiero pensar que estamos haciendo algo para todos, ¿no? Y esto es lo más bonito. Y sobre todo lo que aprendemos. Para la cocina es muy importante, a pesar de los cocineros.
Thank you, Andoni. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's a great pleasure. I would like to discuss more hours and hours, but the time is limited. And then now that we have the question section, we don't have much time. Maybe just a question. Julian, if you want to answer this question, they say in Spanish, ¿existen líneas de investigación concretas a las que se dirige el journal o está más abierto? Julián, el micro, por favor.
Contestaré en español también, un poco por cortesía. Bueno, al final las líneas están bastante tipificadas en el MN Scope, y yo creo que son líneas que son muy amplias, porque la gastronomía al final tiene tantas vertientes, y además de cara a futuro, que es a lo mejor lo que no hemos hablado, va a tener nuevas vertientes, no solamente implicadas con turismo, con salud, sino también implicadas con cosas que todavía ni conocemos, ¿no? Pues todavía falta mucho muchas cosas por aplicar, tecnologías que ya que ya existen y que ya se están usando como CRISP, pero usarlas a nivel gastronómico, no solamente a nivel funcional. Y no sé si estoy contestando o me estoy yendo por las ramas, pero creo que esas líneas están claras, y que lo bueno de estas líneas y lo bueno de lo que quiero llegar es que la gastronomía sigue avanzando, y esas líneas se van a dibujar, y se van a redibujar una y otra vez, ¿no? Según vaya avanzando esta disciplina, que es muy nueva en creación.
Okay. Thank you so much. We don't have more time, so sorry, just to answer more questions. I think that the organization can just collect all the questions, and we can just send an email answering the questions. I mean, I feel kind of a bit bad, because we don't have time so huge people like you, all the speakers, because I mean, each of you, you could just been talking for hours, and it would have been so interesting. But we don't have more time. I hope that you enjoy the talk and the speakers and the whole audience. I hope that it is more clear now what is this kind of journal and what do we want to do. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much again for being here, and